If you were to poll 100 people and ask them, what are the 4 most important positions to target in the transfer portal? I can guarantee you would hear quarterback, offensive line, defensive line, and wide receiver in some ranking, which I can't fault you on because that's correct. But then there's the 5th spot, the wild card. For me, it's far too low. It's cornerback. Because if I can create a no-fly zone defense against any explosive offense in the country, I know I can win every single game and go on a deep run into the college football playoff, which is why I think that Georgia cornerback Julian Humphrey is going to be one of the more sought-after defenders in the transfer portal. He's already got visits lined up. He's been talking to multiple SEC teams. 23 teams have contacted him since he decided to enter the portal. But what is his best fit for 2025? Let's break it all on down. Welcome on into SEC Unfiltered. It's Cole Thompson here. Like the video, smash that ring notification, and of course, make sure that you hit subscribe to the channel because we're talking college football every single day. Download the podcast version of the show. Follow us on the socials, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. If you want this back and forth banner with me to keep on going, it's at Mr. Cole Thompson on the socials. And check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at RHOBACK. Go to RHOBACK.com and use the promo code SECU for 20% off your first purchase. Holiday season is right around the corner, so what better gift to give someone in your life than a RHOBACK pullover, a RHOBACK fleece, a RHOBACK hoodie, whatever tickles your fancy. RHOBACK.com, promo code SECU, 20% off your first purchase. Julian Humphrey is not just some former 4-star that never saw action that decided to transfer because he was frustrated playing in the SEC. This was a guy that started 8 games and eventually was benched for Daniel Harris after the matchup against UMass. He didn't play in the Bulldogs' 8 overtime game against Georgia Tech. He decided to enter the portal right before the SEC championship. This is somebody with playing experience, and this is somebody that has learned the craft under a defensive back himself in Kirby Smart. So even though it didn't fit in Athens, that doesn't mean it won't fit anywhere else. And he's got a ton of offers on the table. SMU, I think, is going to 100% be a player in this. I think Florida State, Miami, both are going to be a player in this. Oregon, you just saw what Jabbar Muhammad did this past year. They're going to be a player in this. Houston, he's from the Houston area. They're going to be a player. But we're an SEC channel, so we're only going to talk about the SEC teams. For starters, I think Missouri needs to go all in. Again, proof of concept. You've watched as more and more defensive players came on in last year after Blake Baker left, and they learned, grew, developed underneath Corey Batoon. And you still need another secondary cornerback to replace Trey Norwood. So if you're able to land somebody with experience going up against some of the premier players in the conference, every single rep, whether that be at Florida, whether that be at Tennessee, whether that be at Ole Miss, you know that that is going to bolster up your secondary. Keep in mind, there are going to be players joining Alabama at wide receiver. There's going to be players joining South Carolina at wide receiver. There's going to be players joining Texas A&M at wide receiver. And those were your 3 losses. It's the same schedule with a little bit of outside noise in the non-con. Eli Drinkowitz beats to his own drum. He is always going to be the second chance morale mentality type of persona. He doesn't care what the rest of the world thinks. And if I'm Julian Humphrey, and I know for a fact that I was talked down to, that I was benched, I want to go to a place where I know that won't happen. Second chances are on the horizon. Mizzou feels like a very underlying spot. They were a top 25 defense for most of the year. They were a top 40 defense in scoring in the SEC. There's an opportunity for them to still be a player in the college football playoff for 2025, depending on the schedule. It just fits on paper like this should be a conversation worth having. Number 2 is LSU. LSU needs to get better in the secondary. They've lost some players. They're going to lose more names to the transfer portal. They're going to lose more names to the NFL draft. And you've already heard Brian Kelly. He's brought this up. We'll see you in the national championship in 2025. Okay, man, clock's running. You got to get as many players in there as possible. Credit where credit's due to what we saw from this defensive staff by Blake Baker in year 1, because we all knew it was going to be the Achilles heel. And it was in the Alabama game, and it was in the Florida game. But they also were able to hold one of the most explosive offenses in the country in Ole Miss to 26 points. They also were able to find their mojo at the right time. There was a big reason to believe that LSU maybe was going to be a college football playoff dark horse. You got the quarterback back. Now it's all about adding the reinforcements around him. And some people don't realize when I say adding in reinforcements, it's not just at wide receiver and offensive line. It's at defensive tackle. It's at linebacker. It's at cornerback. It's at safety. It's at defensive end. And you need those players because the best thing to counteract a sometimes docile offense is a dominant defense. I think that you're going to see LSU 100% be right in the conversation for a college football playoff berth in 2025. I think that they have the right quarterback. I think you need to better up your secondary if you want to be an explosive team and you want to be able to take down Alabama. and you want to be able to take down Ole Miss, and you want to be able to take down Texas A&M, because those are the games that when you really look back, if there was just a bit more explosivity, if the defense could play a little bit stronger, they're probably blowouts on the other side. Let's go to what I believe is going to be the last team before the real two big ones. Ole Miss, proof of concept. Lane Kiffin adds everybody in the portal. Is he going to do it again? He should. Why not? Until it stops working, why not go bolster up your team as much as humanly possible? You're losing multiple defensive backs. You're losing multiple defensive linemen. You do have at least a good quarterback and a good wide receiver to build your next foundation around, but you know that when you go to Oxford, you leave a better player, and possibly even with the draft eligible grade, Trey Amos is going to be gone. And when you look back at his career, there's people talking about him as a day one pick. If I'm Julian Humphrey and I'm saying to myself, I want to go to a place to where I'm going to learn, I'm going to still be playing against the most competitive competition. So Georgia, that's going to be on my radar. I'm also going to be playing against Kentucky. That's going to be a game to where we came down to the wire with. I would like to show dominance at home this time, or actually it would be in Lexington the second time if you were going to Ole Miss. Regardless, I want to play against the strictest competition, and I want to have a little bit of that animosity. Let me go down to Hotty Toddy Land. I promise you, I will be CB1 before the end of camp. But then there's actually the two first front runners. I think SMU is going to be a really big player, but they're not in the SEC. They're in the ACC, so they're out. There's something about an opportunity to come home. He's from the state of Texas, grew up in Houston. He played at I think he played at Webster High School, if I'm not mistaken. I know he's from Webster, which is right outside downtown Houston. Regardless, when you look at a guy like Julian Humphrey, Texas and Texas A&M are the front runners, and they should be. He has a visit lined up with Texas A&M. Now, there's a proof of concept there as well with what you've seen underneath Mike Elko. Number one, dude is a defensive guru. Dude will get the best version out of you. He doesn't care if you come from the AAC, the Big 12, the Big 10, the Conference USA. You are going to play a certain brand of football, and it is going to be successful for a long time out in College Station. Will Lee was a stud. People don't realize just how good Will Lee was this past year in coverage. And that was because of what he learned underneath this staff headlined by Mike Elko. So a defensive-minded coach with an opportunity to play closer to home, because College Station is closer than Austin. You go on in, you compete alongside with Des Ricks, you go compete with some other players, you get to see some action. Maybe you line up at the nickel position, and you eventually are the selling point that gets Texas A&M over the hump, and now they're in the college football playoff for 2025. It makes a lot of sense. A&M has got to bolster up their defense. They're always going to want to bring back the mentality of the wrecking crew style. I think that it's a match made in heaven when it comes to what brand of defense they play, what aura of defense they play, and also for Humphrey to play close to home. But then there's Texas, and Texas also has a big calling card. Not only were we a top 15 defense last year in the Big 12, we're a top 10 defense in the SEC. Oh, and you know that you could have played against us in the matchup in Atlanta, but you decided to enter the portal. So how funny would it be that the only games that we lost in 2024 were to Georgia? Well, how about in 2025 when we switched the schedule and now we have to play on the road in Athens? We go into their backyard, a place that people are not very happy with you because if you left the team early, you didn't get to be a part of the SEC lore. And you heard Kirby Smart say, I don't even have time to care about what you got going on. And he ends up having a big-time pick six. That a pretty good selling point? I think it's a pretty good selling point. You're going to be a player in the college football playoff because you got a 5 seed despite losing twice. You're going to be a player in the SEC because if you already made it in year one, you think that you're going to slow on down later on? Please. I could see this being a really good fit. There's also the conversation of when you look at a team like Texas, they have Johnny Nansen, who was a phenomenal addition in place of Jeff Chill this offseason, and Pete Kubitowski isn't going anywhere. Transfers have come on in, and they've left better because of it. Trey Moore has proven he can be a difference maker. Andrew Makuba hit the reset button on his career after a breakout freshman season at Clemson. So you look at the defensive names and how they've transitioned to a role out on the 40 acres. It's a hard pass up. So if I am Julian Humphrey, I think that my top two teams are easily Texas A&M and Texas. I want to play in front of the hometown crowd. I want to play with tougher competition. I want to be better adjusted to be able to make it to the NFL. You're going to go to the NFL if you play in Texas A&M and you do your job. You're going to go to the NFL if you go to Texas and you do your job. They're punching out Sunday stars left and right, and it's only going to get better. And you get to play in two of the biggest games of the year. One in Austin against Texas A&M or Texas, and one against Georgia or potentially LSU. Regardless, how do you not have those two at the forefront? If I'm Julian Humphrey, it really is a two-man battle. Do I want to be saying gig him? Or do I want to be saying hook him? But let me know in the comment section down below. Where do you think Julian Humphrey lands in the transfer portal? Like, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure that you follow us on all the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Download the podcast version of the show and check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. Until next time, folks, I am Cole Thompson. Peace.